Because earlier we were talking about the significance of situating the religious experience in the particular societal type. You discovered that religious trance postures are specific to a particular societal type.
The postures that I found are associated with the hunter societies, but mainly with the horticulturalists. And there is a curious contradiction now, because we modern urbanites, are able to go on a spirit journey with a posture like that, and we can divine and we can heal and so forth. So how does that happen? How is that possible? According to classical anthropological theory, that's impossible. What I have discovered and proven over and over again is that the rituals themselves are so powerful, all the information is there, that it can be transferred as a whole into any kind of an environment. So that an urbanite can experience precisely what the posture wants to accomplish. The postures are complete rituals. And if they are done correctly, and this is always the alpha and omega of every ritual, every aspect of the ritual has to be correct. If the postures are done correctly, then the experience follows automatically. Not the individual segments or details of the experience, but the nature of the experience.
And Felicitas, you mean by doing the postures correctly, you don't mean just sitting or standing or lying in a specific posture. You mean having a ritual, situating the postures in the context of a ritual, and adding rhythmic stimulation to the central nervous system along with the postures.
Correct. It's like adding water to something that has been dry for a very long time. All of a sudden, when you add water, it awakens to new life. The fascinating aspect of all of this is that it mediates for the city dweller a contact with the habitat, the transposed habitat, the habitat in the alternate reality that he may not have access to in any other way. People will say things like, I saw animals, but I don't know what they were. Not only that, people can change into an animal. All of a sudden, people can experience what it is like to be bounding through a forest and crunching down on a rabbit and eating the flesh of a prey. Very often I get reports that one of the most wonderful experiences was to be bounding through the savannah or over the desert as an animal, all four legs. And to my mind, this produces a bridge between the alienated city dweller and the world he is trying to protect. Because we must realize that the environmental movement did not start with the peasants, did not start with the farmers. They are bitter enemies very often. They are changing also, but they are very often bitter enemies. You see that in the Southwest, where the Hispanic cultivators are very angry about the fact that the American Indians there have land of their own. My gosh, we took a whole continent away from them, and now we don't want to let them have those few thousand acres. But the argument is they are not doing anything with the land. But the Indian says the land is sacred. And so that is what the city dweller is unwittingly passing into. And now this unwittingly changes to conscious change if at the same time there is also a religious experience connected with it. I know from history that once a movement also has a religious motivation, nothing can be done to stop it. And this is my fond hope that I can contribute to that. Lots and lots of people are doing many different things in the same direction. I do not claim any primacy or any possession of the magic tool, but I am one of a very large group of people. I'm part of a movement, and those people who work with me are part of the movement that is adding the spiritual dimension, so-called the religious dimension, to the environmental movement.
Felicitas, I have noticed going to workshops of yours, being a trainee in the Institute training program, being at the Institute in New Mexico, the Cuyamungue Institute, I've noticed that when the people there experience the trance postures, that over the course of a weekend or a week or however long they spend together, curious things begin to happen in terms of the community. And as you pointed out to me, that's not because you put up a billboard that says, now we will do this in order to build community. In fact, you are basically opposed to the talking method for very many things. Would you talk about that as a byproduct, if you will, of doing the postures and what happens in community?
When I first began discovering the presence of trance behavior in all ritual, non-Western ritual, it was obvious to me that the glue that holds the small societies together is the common trance experience. And without ever trying, this happens also there. Once you do a lot of trances together, you relate to each other almost through the skin. And you become so much one body, as it is said, that afterwards when you leave Cuyamungue, you have a culture shock to deal with. That all of a sudden when you get out into the atomized world and you wait for a plane in the airport and so forth, you feel dispossessed. We are by nature social beings, not loners. And it is through the trance experience, through the religious trance experience, that we can find our way back into a community. I am aware that there is a lot of community activity going on now, and I'm all for that. Like building in such a way that you can settle together and all the families together and occasionally taking a meal together. Those attempts have been with the West for decades, for centuries. All the utopias of the 19th century were built on that. All of them dissolved because they did not have a spiritual core.
And when you say a spiritual core, you mean a ritualized, a context in ritual of a specific physiological experience of the alternate reality. Right. You don't mean a shared belief system, for instance.
No. In fact, when somebody tells me that ritual is a belief system, then I disagree. To my mind, religion is shared experience. Shared experience of the alternate reality. And unless that is present, to my mind, there is no religion. There is, oh yes, there is theology, there is religious philosophy, there are the theories of religious psychology, all sorts of hyphenated matters. There is the sociology of religion, but there is no religion. In the beginning, when I was still totally in the mode of experimental science, I just had people come and sit and to do a posture, and then we would talk about it, and I would tell them what the posture was about afterwards from my knowledge so they could interpret their own experience. And I always had the feeling there was something missing. And gradually it was really a matter of revelation. One element after the other began to fall into place, so that I understood that in order to have a complete ritual, I also had to bless the rattle so that the rattle would no longer be an object but rather a companion that has a life of its own, that I had to invite the spirits to come, and that I had to release the spirits after they had been there. Once, I remember I was quite embarrassed. I didn't know how to do this without offending people. I had 2 Protestant preachers and a psychiatrist in the group. At that time, that was novelty. Since then, it has happened often, and it no longer causes any problems. At that time, I thought, well, the psychiatrist will think of it as something pathological, and the preachers will think of it as something pagan, and both will be alienated, both groups, so what do I do? So I didn't. And I lay down, as I always do, between sessions to take a noonday nap, and instead of falling asleep, I had a vision. And in that vision, I was desperately trying to hide something under my pillow. And the understanding was, it's not a voice directly, but it's an understanding communicated, was that if I wouldn't be hiding things, problems would not have arisen. And I wasn't even aware that there were any problems. So I went back through my notes, and I realized that while usually when I start a session, somebody will report, for example, the presence of wind in the room, it had not been reported. And so I thought, well, I don't care what happens with the psychiatrist and with the preachers, I cannot leave this out. So I started the next session by doing these little additional rituals that had been revealed. And I had the joy afterwards that one of the Protestant preachers said, and she had seen the spirits of the wind passing by. So that was a signature from the spirits that this was correct. We cannot do this as an experimental session for science. We can only do it by entering into the entire world, and that world includes an invitation to the spirits.
Felicitas, you just mentioned that you cannot do these sessions of rituals with trance postures as an experimental research tool. And yet you are widely respected and very highly respected as a rigorous scientist. Would you talk about the scientific work that you are doing about the postures?
So indeed, I can take the entire ritual into the laboratory, and the spirits are not offended by it. So that's what we do. And it was this kind of work where the religious experience can be brought to life in its entirety, any place. You don't have to be in a particular building or within a particular environment. You can bring it about any place. That made the research in the laboratory possible. At one time when we were in Professor Goodman's laboratory in Vienna, where the direct current research is done on brainwave activity, I always ask afterwards, what did you experience? And the young man who was in the little Faraday cage at the time said that there was one moment which was absolutely sheerest ecstasy for him, where everything turned brilliant white, and there was a brilliant white buffalo, and the brilliantly white buffalo lifted him up and said, "You are my son." And the laboratory technician said, "Can you judge approximately when this might have happened?" And Gerhard, who is very experienced, said, yes, it happened about the middle of the second section. We did 30-minute sessions there. And we went to the printout, and there was a peak. Right in the middle of the regular curve, there was a tremendous peak.
In the brainwave pattern.
Yeah, in the brainwave pattern. So there is really no conflict. We can do both.
Felicitas, we have been talking today at a crossroads of the alternate reality and ordinary reality. And I think that one of the things I'm learning from studying your work and working with you is that the one road that we have traveled from hunter-gathering to horticulture to agriculture and now to city dwelling is a road that, if we continue straight ahead, leads only toward the ordinary reality and completely leaves out any possibility of intersection with the alternate reality, which was such a part of the horticultural and hunter-gatherer cultures. Would you talk about what happens if we leave out the alternate reality and lead such a unidimensional existence?
Basically, life becomes boring. And it is, to my mind, one of the reasons of the many psychosomatic illnesses of the modern world, that the world has become so unidimensional that it is no longer an adventure, it's no longer joy, and no longer creative. And all of those possibilities are rooted in the experience of the alternate reality. If you have only one reality, then you're only half a being. If you see also the alternate reality and go adventuring in that direction, then you're a complete human being.